Ladies and gentlemen, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has presented the Interim Budget 2024 today. There was no election populism, no freebies, no sops. That's exactly what all of us expected. To cut a long story short, the interim budget was a non-event, and many people are saying, thank God for it. This is what an interim budget should be. After all, it is a financial plan just for the next 3 or 4 months till the next government is sworn in, and then they will present their full union budget. Now, this was a sixth budget, and this came right before the elections. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, just like her name, stuck to Nirmal Vandan, thanking taxpayers, but giving them no relief. That's the big headline for us. However, the interim budget kept its focus on Nari, Yuva and Kisan, a budget for the future, as it were. Now, one of the biggest takeaways of this budget, the government is proposing the highest capex spending of 11.11 lakh crores, which is an increase of 11.1%. Another big takeaway, 3 new railway corridors. The government also plans to elevate common man's travel experience by revamping 40,000 rail bogies to Vande Bharat standards. The government has also increased the allocation in Ayushman Bharat scheme from 7.2 crores to 7.5 crores. It has also decided to build 2 crore more houses under the PM Awas Gramin Yojana in the next 5 years. Now, apart from boosting infrastructure, the Modi government also intends to boost tourism in the country, starting with, where else? Lakshadweep. That is, as you know, in the middle of a massive controversy. That controversy simply refuses to die down. The government plans to undertake infrastructure and port connectivity projects in islands, including in Lakshadweep. In fact, states have been offered interest-free loans to boost tourism. Now, we do know that the Modi-led central government has presented a conservative budget ahead of the elections. It plans to present a detailed roadmap for Viksit Bharat in July, after getting a third-time position in the Lok Sabha elections, The government was very confident today, and that came through in the budget as well, that it is coming back in 2024, and in July 2024, which is barely a few months from now, they will be in a position to present a full-fledged union budget. Listen in to some of the highlights.
The government has reduced and rationalized tax rates. Under the new tax scheme, there is now no tax liability for taxpayers with income up to 7 lakh rupees, up from 2.2 lakh rupees in the financial year 2013-14. Tourism, including spiritual tourism, has tremendous opportunities for local entrepreneurship. States will be encouraged to take up comprehensive development of iconic tourist centers, branding and marketing them at global scale. A framework for rating of the centers based on quality of facilities and services will be established. Long-term interest-free loans will be provided to states for financing such development on matching basis. To address the emerging fervor for domestic tourism, Honorable Speaker, sir, projects for port connectivity, tourism infrastructure and amenities will be taken up on our islands, including Lakshadweep.
निर्मला जी का ये बजट देश के भविष्य के निर्माण का बजट है। इस बजट में 2047 के विकसित भारत की नींव को मजबूत करने की गारंटी है। इस बजट में फिस्कल डेफिसिट को नियंत्रण में रखते हुए कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर को 11,11,111 करोड़ रुपए की ऐतिहासिक ऊंचाई दी गई है। अर्थशास्त्रियों की भाषा में कहें तो एक प्रकार से स्वीट स्पॉट है।
For the Prime Minister has called the interim budget historic, but the opposition is calling it bogus. In fact, the Congress party is saying that this interim budget was a budget by the rich, for the rich, and of the rich. Why are they saying that? I'm being joined by ex-Finance Minister P. Chidambaram on the broadcast. Mr. Chidambaram, good evening to you. Good to have you on the show. Why do you say this budget is for the rich and by the rich, given that this budget barely had anything for anyone, including the middle class and the rich?
There is nothing in it for anyone. What you mean is there is nothing new in it for the rich. The rich have already been pampered. The rich have already been pampered by corporate tax rate cut. The rich have been already pampered by writing off their bank loans. The rich have already been pampered by allowing them to take over corporate assets by paying on an average 20% of the bank loans. The rich have already been pampered. So for next 3-4 months, if they are not pampered, they will take their summer holidays, and hopefully the finance minister and the prime minister think that they will come back to power and continue to pamper them.
Mr. Chidambaram, one of the criticisms that has come for this budget from the opposition is that it was couched in generalities. There was no substance. But you've been a finance minister. What could we really expect? This is, after all, an interim budget, a financial plan just for the next 3-4 months, technically.
I didn't expect her to make any dramatic announcements. But she should have at least acknowledged the weaknesses in the economy. She should have acknowledged the problems faced by the people and promised to address them. Has she acknowledged rampant unemployment? Has she acknowledged high inflation? Has she acknowledged the huge disparities between the bottom 50% and the top 10%? Has she acknowledged the widening inequalities in a state which declares it is committed to social and economic justice? Has she acknowledged the burdens on working women? Therefore, she should have acknowledged them. She should have also acknowledged the weaknesses in the macro picture, debt to GDP ratio, the high fiscal deficit. She should have acknowledged them, the weakening of the rupee. She should have acknowledged them and then given an explanation or given a promise of how she will address them in the full budget.
But sir, there is a promise, and the promise is to come back. Nirmala Sitharaman, if I can quote her, said that our next budget will be presented in July, the next budget of this government, which means they're fairly confident of coming back.
That cockiness I admire, that I will come back. All right, we'll assume you will come back. But why don't you acknowledge the problems today and promise to address them when you come back? I mean, I could also turn the argument to say she did not acknowledge the mistakes of the last 10 years and she did not promise to address them because she fears they will not come back. That will be an argument against her argument. But leave out both arguments. I think at the end of the term, end of 10 years, either in the economic survey or in a paper or in a budget speech, the finance minister of the day owes a duty to acknowledge the weaknesses of the economy along with the strengths of the economy.
Mr. Chidambaram, realistically, which government acknowledges their mistakes, especially one that is going into elections in the next 2 to 3 months?
If you don't acknowledge, you say, I'm not acknowledging it in the interim speech, I'll do it tomorrow, and then she can come back and make a speech in the course of the debate on the interim budget.
Okay, my final question then, how would you rate the interim budget? You have presented many, many budgets as well. You have presented some interim budgets as well. How would you rate this one?
This rating business, it's not my business. Go and ask ICRA or some credit rating agency. I, in a statement made on behalf of the Congress Party at 5 o'clock, narrated my assessment of the budget. I'm thoroughly disappointed that she has not acknowledged, leave alone attempted to address or promised to address. She has not even acknowledged the problems faced by youth, by women, by farmers, and the weaknesses in the economy. What was the fiscal deficit in the UPA's terminal year 2013-14? And what is the fiscal deficit in the terminal year of the NDA 2023-24? Why don't you put it on the screen of your television? Put this number of fiscal deficit then and the fiscal deficit now, 4.5 versus 5.8. Put on the left-hand side the average growth rate for 10 years and the average growth rate for the last 10 years. Put those numbers, put the FDI numbers and FDI numbers. You see, as time goes by, some parameters will improve. For example, you and I will become older 1 year later, and we will become older again 1 year later. So that's not a metric at all. Metrics are the metrics used internationally to assess the strength of the economy. For example, again, they put out that $5 trillion. Now, how many times have we heard the $5 trillion? Remember, the original promise was we will reach $5 trillion in 23-24, March 31-24. It was pushed back to 25-26, pushed back again by the chief economic advisor, if I remember right, to 26-27, and now they're talking about 27-28. Therefore, why don't you look at the promises and how much has been achieved? Okay. You have a split screen on your television. You do your homework. I'll help you. Put promises on one side and the outcome on the other. Example, the 2 crore jobs, 15 lakhs rupees per bank account. Put all those promises on the left-hand side. Today, again, they trotted out so-called achievements, electricity for all. Is there electricity for all? Toilets for all. Is there toilets for all? Defecation-free India. Is India open defecation-free? I mean, their own reports show that a significant proportion of toilets are not working or not usable because there is no water, there is no way to clean the toilets. Therefore, that is the measure of analysis and assessment. I don't expect the government to do that in an interim budget, but you and I must do that. If we are in government, you and the opposition party must do that. That is the job of the media. That is the job of the opposition. We are doing our job.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chidambaram, and we are doing our job as well. Thank you very much for joining us here on the broadcast. Thank you very much for your time. I think I'm being joined, I can go across to Arundhati Bhattacharya, who's the chairperson and CEO of Salesforce India, joining us on the broadcast. Ma'am, thank you very much. What were the highlights for you in this interim budget? Many people said, don't expect much. After all, this is only an interim budget, and that's exactly how it's turned out to be.
I was amongst one of those who said the same. So I also didn't expect much. But I think, what this budget really shows is a lot of confidence on the part of the government. And obviously, what they have done in the first part is point out all the areas that they are going to work on when they form the next government. So very clearly, they have pointed out the four vulnerable sections of society, being the youth, the poor, the farmers, and the women. Okay. And obviously, all the things that revolve around these four segments, what they intend to do, they've not specified the amounts that they are going to spend, but that there is a full intention of having a number of programs and schemes in order to enable these people, empower, as the FM said it, empower these segments. I think, that's very much in the roadmap. And in the full budget, you will see those numbers coming out in respect of individual schemes. So that is very clearly laid out. The second thing I would say is that, I'm very glad that they have been very fiscally reticent. I think everybody is commenting on it, and you can see, the fiscal deficit. People were hoping that it would be around 5.2. They're actually bringing in at 5.1, which is even better. The government borrowings haven't gone up. The capex, people were expecting, given the little bit more of fiscal space, might go up a little more. But even then, what they haven't done is they haven't cut it down. They have kept it at a healthy 11.11%, which is pretty good. The fact of the matter is that is one area which I think maybe, given the fact that they've been very conservative about revenue estimates, maybe subsequently that is an area where you may see further expansion, because I think everybody is reaping the benefits of larger capex in the system, and surely they would like to double down on that. Uh, Having said that, I think, they've been very reticent, they've been very conservative, they've not tried any, populism kind of sudden outgoes and stuff like that. They have promised no such outgoes. What they have promised is that give us the mandate and you'll have a stable roadmap addressing all the vulnerable segments of society. And, these are possibly, a sampler of schemes that will come, such as more of rural housing, insurance cover for the rural Anganwadi workers and the ASHA workers, the solar rooftop, which is going to give you free electricity and give you employment, the innovation scheme program, which will enable you to get very low cost or no cost loans for 50 years. Who you even expects, something of that sort. So very soft loans for 50 years for innovators, the continuation of the tax for the startups. Okay. So I think, all the right buttons have been pressed, the right signals given. It's very well done, actually. Really, really very well done.
You spoke about tax, always a raw nerve with India's middle class. There was a thank you note from our finance minister to India's taxpayers. She said, thank you very much for the money you give us. We use it wisely. We use it to develop the country. But, we could have, all of us, I think, who pay taxes could have done with a little more than just a thank you. I mean, a 30% tax slab. Okay, it was asking for too much, but bringing it down to 25%, it's not happened in the interim budget. You're telling us we shouldn't have expected it, all right. Do you see it happening in July?
I don't. And I think the government at this point of time may do certain transfers to the lower segment of the society, because you're not seeing enough of a demand push from the lower segment. And that demand push is important in order to bring in more investment. But for the middle classes, I do not really see something, at least for this year. Maybe going forward, as the revenues become more buoyant, the revenues have become more buoyant. And as those revenues become even more buoyant, as you see more, compliance, basically, that people don't escape the net. They are all part of the net and they all start paying their share. At some point of time, it will start coming down. But I would think, that would be more towards the, maybe another year or 2 years is where I see this current tax rates being. Because I think it's also important for them to get the amount of revenues in order to run the kind of programs that they are talking about. This is all going to cost money. It doesn't come free. Now, where will the money come from? The money will come from those who can afford to spend it. And as you can see, it was also mentioned by, I think, within the budget itself, that, the consumption is coming mainly from the top segment of society. Okay. So even in spite of the higher tax rates, the consumption there has not slowed. Where the consumption has slowed down is at the bottom. And again, in India, demand rolls up from the bottom. The top itself is not big enough to create a demand push that will bring in further investment. So at the end of the day, therefore, the DBT is very important because it has a lot of knock-on effects. And those knock-on effects ultimately benefit the people who are higher up in their income status. And therefore, they will try and bolster that piece rather than giving some interim relief to the middle. At this point of time, I think the middle is more or less going to remain where it is. That's my reading of the situation.
All right. We'll see. And it is what it is. It is what it is. What else do we say? Arundhati Bhattacharya, thank you very much for your time here on Mirror Now and helping us understand what the big takeaways from the budget are. Thank you very much.